Great. Well, welcome to scenario writing evaluation training, and the main purpose of this training is to garner interest and expertise for additional evaluators for our international scenario writing competitions. Hopefully you have been able to review the items that Kyla has sent out to you. She sent out some sample evaluations and how they were evaluated, along with our official guidelines for evaluation. And those guidelines are actually referenced in Future Problem Solving Programs policy. They are worked on and voted on by the affiliate council and included as our official guiding document. So that is the basis of the training. Tonight's overview, or morning maybe if you are in a different part of the world, we are going to take a look at the overview of the ISWC, which stands for the International Scenario Writing Competition. We're going to then discuss the role of the evaluator, preparations for evaluation. We're going to review the requirements for the students in the submission of their scenarios. We're going to discuss how to evaluate. We are also going to review how to provide feedback to our young writers so that they can continue to develop their craft. And then we're going to explore next steps if you are indeed interested in becoming certified as an international scenario writing evaluator. I will mention this towards the end, and I know Kyla has probably mentioned this to you in the communications, but this certification for the international scenario writing will occur through the international office. If you also want to evaluate for your affiliate programs, you would need to contact your affiliate director and also get certified using the qualifications that those directors require also. Who completes evaluations? Coaches evaluate. Parents can evaluate. Parents can also be the coaches. Affiliate directors can evaluate. Authors themselves can evaluate. Future problem solving alumni. They make great evaluators. Some people here are probably alumni. We're going to find that out in just a minute. Problem solvers can evaluate. Futurists can evaluate. And there are many other professional options that people have offered to evaluate with us before. So Kyla's going to do a poll now. I'm watching the results come in. Almost as much fun as watching the elections come in. Kyla, are we doing a minute on the poll? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, according to our poll, 19% of you are coaches, 13% are parents, 31% of our group is affiliate directors. We do have an author or two with us, and we have a significant number of alumni with us. So as you can see, our group is very diverse, and that makes the feedback to students excellent. Oh, I also see someone, Natalie, who is both a parent and an author. Thank you, Natalie, for chiming in on that dual hat you wear. So that does give our students a very great experience with the evaluations they receive, and also in our evaluator pool, and making sure that we really are across the board looking at the importance of writing and creative writing and futuristic trends from a wide variety of backgrounds. Okay, it looks like I have to reshare my PowerPoint. Are we back on, Kyla?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, what are students asked to do in the International Scenario Writing Competition? The short answer is the authors are asked to craft a story that could take place in the future based as logical outgrowth of actions or events that have already happened and projecting it into the future. They write their scenarios as if the future is the present. So they are including that in their story. It is part of the creative piece that they have crafted. One thing that our younger writers really develop with maturity is the infusion of those futuristic concepts and trends, making those natural instead of just including those as gadgets. So those concepts and trends should be incorporated, and I think that's an important word for us to make sure that we look for with our students. They're not required to specifically state a date when their scenario occurs, but throughout the events and setting of the story, we can gather that their story is indeed 20 to 30 years into the future. So who competes in this international scenario writing competition? Well, all of our affiliate programs have earned a first through third place entry. So for instance, I'm sitting in Florida. Florida Future Problem Solving can enter first, second, and third junior scenarios, first, second, and third middle, and first, second, and third senior. So essentially 9 scenarios from each affiliate may be submitted. The evaluations in this competition are new evaluations. The evaluations that they received to earn their first, second, or third place in their affiliate are not considered. This is a new competition against new scenarios than they previously competed against before. So what is the role of the evaluator? What are we requesting from our evaluators and valuing in the important role that they play in this competition? We ask that you follow the guidelines, both in word and in spirit. There are 2 big pieces to our guidelines. The first big piece is the philosophy of our evaluation, our feedback that we provide, and then also the technical aspects of our evaluation. Those are the more specific things, the points that are provided for various aspects. So 2 big pieces there that we ask you to play a role in. We ask that you collaborate or ask for help if needed. We ask that you meet deadlines. We ask that you be willing to suspend belief. Our writers are very creative. They come from around the globe, and oftentimes their realities are different than the realities we may find ourselves in. So we have to suspend our disbelief and really reduce any biases when evaluating for our students. And importantly, to keep an open mind. None of us have that magic ball to see into the future, so the creations of our students might actually come into play, and we have to keep our minds open to that. We also ask that as you're evaluating that you be consistent, that your rankings are not too much like Santa and where you're giving the highest scores possible, and that you're also not Mr. Scrooge or Mrs. Scrooge, and that you take the age range of the students into consideration. And as we explore the training further, you will see how the rubric can really help and guide you from swaying too much to Santa's side or too much to Scrooge's side, so that we can consistently give students evaluations that are within a logical outreach and range of what the other evaluators are giving them. We need to understand subjectivity. We talked a little bit already about biases. Please be aware of your own biases, whether they are positive biases or negative biases. Doing that self-reflection piece, knowing kind of our internal triggers of things that maybe we believe very passionately about, will help us to counter against it. So being self-aware of your biases. Acknowledge that there are ideas that are going to be different from our own. We do know that these diverse ideas do make for more interesting stories. If we were to read several stories with all of the same ideas of our own, we might grow tired of reading the same things. So acknowledge these as things that make these stories stand out from the others. We want to ignore any cues in the student's writing that may reflect bias in them. We ask our students not to reference themselves. However, oftentimes you might read a piece of writing from a student, and many of us have probably already experienced this, but just based on the context or the vocabulary, we can tell the background of the student, and we want to make sure that that doesn't lead us to evaluate them unfairly. And most importantly, if we are following those evaluation guidelines and our score sheet rubric, that's going to help our consistent scores for our students. So before we get started evaluating, we will send out items to prepare. Research is vital. Knowledge of the various topics is very necessary. We have 10 possible topics that the students can write on in the International Scenario Writing Competition. We do notice at the International Office that there are topics that are a little more enticing to the students, so oftentimes we'll see scenarios on some topics more frequently than others. But essentially, our Southern Hemisphere affiliates are right now beginning their competitions, and they're moving from their qualifying problem to their affiliate bowl topics. So they're just now working on topics that students in the Northern Hemisphere completed 6, 7, 8 months ago. So we do have two schedules that we work from. So we have the Southern Hemisphere topics and the Northern Hemisphere topics. And then the students are also allowed to write on the prior IC topic. And in this instance, last year's topic was on criminal justice. So students could submit a scenario based on that topic for this year's competition. So how do we prepare? We do ask that our evaluators read the overview of each topic from our publication, the Readings, Research, and Resources. This is just a 1.5 to 2 page typed overview of the topic. We realize that you don't have several weeks to prepare for this competition, both in time and effort to put forth. So we just ask that you skim the topic chapters in that same RR&R publication. We also request you read just a couple of the articles from each topic from the suggested readings, and these will be provided to you in a PDF format, so you can just click on the links and view these on the internet. And then maybe discuss some of the main concepts of the topics with another evaluator. And you may have an evaluator you can talk with face-to-face or via the telephone, or it might be that you would reach out to Kyla and just let her know that you'd like to be on some discussion with other evaluators, and we can provide that for you virtually. Before we move on, I just want to pause here and see if anyone has any questions about the topics that we've covered so far, either the role of the evaluator, what we are looking for in our students, and who enters the competition. Okay, it looks like I don't see any questions. If any come up in the next few slides, feel free to type them in. We went ahead and used the typing input so that we didn't have a lot of talking over and background noise sometimes that happens with these presentations. So what are the requirements for the International Scenario Writing Competition? There are several requirements, technical items such as formatting, font size, margins, word limits, and those kinds of formatting things are confirmed before the competition begins and occurs from the international office. I'm going to pause right here and mention beyond this slide the 1,500 word limit. We do have students who write in their native language, and translations in some countries, the native language is longer than 1,500 words. So we do, in order to meet those differences, allow students to have longer word limits if their native language, the characters and the words in those native languages, are at a higher word count than ours. And those are provided and verified for us. And of course, you would be able to ask us if you did notice that. And then one of the requirements that we do ask our evaluators to take notice of and let us know if there is a concern. If you get a scenario that you don't feel like is related to one of the 10 available topics, if you could please make sure that you let us know that you don't see any relation. And if you feel like the story is present day and not futuristic, we would like to know that as soon as possible. Okay. So here is the process for evaluation. How should you tackle the evaluation process? Let's just kind of imagine that you are evaluating for us and joining in on the International Scenario Writing Competition. We would provide to you 7 to 9 scenarios. And it is a good idea to just read for pleasure all of the scenarios in the packet. Just go ahead and read them through, get a feel for them, see what the holistic quality of all of those scenarios is. And then you might actually want to form a preliminary opinion of the rank order of the scenarios. You're going to naturally see some of the scenarios that are going to rise above the others in quality. And then we ask you to reread each scenario and score according to the rubric, providing feedback to the students. We use a rubric score sheet for our evaluations, and the rubric score sheet for each scenario is based on the following criteria. The first criteria is creative thinking. We're going to explore each of these in depth. This is just an overview. So for creative thinking, the students can earn up to 10 points. That's the same rank as futuristic thinking, up to 10 points. You'll see the next 2 areas, idea development and style and voice, can be earned all the way up to 15 points by the students. The last 3 items, character development, mechanics, and topic-related research, all earn up to 5 points per each of those criterion. You can see if you are mathematically inclined and want to know the totals, each student can earn up to 65 points for their scenario. The point ranges go through 5 kind of abilities. Maybe the scenario is in a beginning range, and that might be if it's 1 through 5. We might say that the beginning is in the 1 point range. Then we have our developing. Maybe we're starting to see some creativity, or we're starting to see some use of style and voice. Proficient. This is a well done scenario. It's very proficient. Strong is you're starting to see those above and beyond aspects of that area you're looking at. Exemplary, these are those stellar, talented aspects that the students are displaying in their scenario. I am going to pause really quick before we get into the specifics of each of these point ranges and the 65 points and how they're earned, and answer a question that popped up. I know Kyla is typing answers and responding as I am speaking, but I do want to share that affiliate programs are, per policy, allowed to make adjustments to the evaluation guidelines and score sheets for their affiliates. So there was a question about that. The affiliate guidelines and the affiliate score sheet could be different, which is why we are hosting this and certifying the evaluators from this training for international competitions only. So that was a good question. So as we apply the scores for each criterion, many of our evaluators who have been evaluating us over the years feel like they begin with the middle descriptor. So if it's 1 through 5, that middle descriptor would be 3. If the range is 1 through 15, that middle descriptor would be in the 7 to 9 point range. So as they look at that middle descriptor compared to that scenario, they would say, okay, it looks like this piece of writing matches all of these items that are in this descriptor. This writing needs to move up to the next higher score. And then they look at the next higher score and they might say, okay, great, this scenario meets all of these things. We're going to move up to the next higher score. If that higher score isn't met, then they would move down to the next lower score. And then you repeat and then assign the best score that fits the scenario within that range. So when we have 3 choices that exist for a descriptor, we want to use the higher number to indicate the scenario if it's closer to the next descriptor, and the lower number to indicate the scenario if it's in the beginning stages. Okay, it looks like I have a hand raised here. So let me try to let, oh, VJ's had his, oh, did you just take it down, it looks like? There are no hands up, so the hand must have been brought down. Maybe I answered it. It is very important, this last bullet on this slide, that we rate each criterion independent of the others. And what we mean by that is if we determine that a scenario is in the highest exemplary ranges of creativity, it might not be in those highest exemplary ranges of style and voice, and maybe in the mid-range for that. So it is very important that as we move through the criterion that we do keep them independent of the others. So the first criterion we're going to take a look at is creative thinking. This one is rated up to 10 points the students can earn for this one. So we want to take a look at elaboration and fluency. Did the students elaborate, and were they fluent in those details, making those details really enable us to see and hear what they were saying? Did they have originality? Were there inventive ideas in there that you're not seeing in other scenarios of the same division? Maybe their setting or their characters have unusual aspects to them. Their setting could be, I don't know, I think about like Nim's Island, you know, that movie, the inventive setting there where they've been shipwrecked and they're stuck there and they've created all of those things. That setting is very unusual than just saying perhaps Mars. So that creative setting, those characters that have those really unique traits, enhance the creative thinking score. A surprise or novel ending. Reading those pieces and coming to the end and the twist, the last paragraph, and you think, wow, I didn't see that coming. So those kinds of things really demonstrate that higher creativity. Flexibility, looking at the variety of the categories of creative ideas. Maybe you have a scenario that has a very creative character, also has a very creative setting, also has maybe a spaceship if they rode on the mission to Moon, Mars, and beyond, that has a lot of inventive aspects to it that enhances the actions of the characters. So if we take a look here in this box, it talks about how do we determine between those highest levels. So if you're looking at strong versus exemplary, it would be how it is sustained throughout the writing. So a strong score would be those wow factors here and there throughout the writing, but the exemplary, that next level, that highest level, would be that you're seeing this creative thinking as a common thread throughout the entire piece. And then the proficient would be evidence is present, but it wouldn't be sustained. So it's not throughout the writing, or the connections may be weak. So there could be some inventive items in the scenario, but they're not really connected to the storyline. And that's where you would determine that proficient score instead of a strong or an exemplary score. I am going to stop right here and see if anyone has any questions specifically about the creative thinking criterion. Okay, I don't see any questions. We will move on. The next criterion we're going to take a look at is our futuristic thinking criterion. Again, this criterion earns up to 10 points for our students. We're looking for consistent application, futuristic trends. A lot of these trends are gleaned from the Readings, Research, and Resources publication, but also the internet. So if you're reading a scenario and you're seeing these trends, what's really great about the information age we're in right now is we can just quickly Google that and get a little insight on the trends that the students are referencing. It is throughout the scenario. There's not just one or two times where a gadget's introduced or a special phone or a special piece of clothing or a special piece of technology, but it's actually part of the story. We want to see the students have used these trends in research as logical projections into the future. Have they taken these futuristic trends from research, from YouTube videos, and logically predicted it within their storyline and made it real and believable? It should almost feel natural. I just mentioned this idea as being believable. So can we actually think, this might really happen in the future? Are they relevant to the writing as a whole? And I like to think of this as it's almost hard to pick out the futuristic trends because they're interwoven into the story and make the entire piece futuristic. So you're not really able to pick them out. And are they looking at terminology that can be used, the vocabulary aspects in their writing? And I like this reminder. We are looking for sophisticated writing, looking at the research, looking at the futuristic thinking, analogies. That's a really great craft to teach students if you are a coach also, making those analogies and creativity, and those will be awarded in those multiple criteria. So You might think that futuristic thinking is part of the creativity score, and you would be right. So that does come through in several different spots. Okay, are there any questions on the futuristic thinking criteria?
Examples of analogies?
What are some examples of analogies? Let's see. I could maybe see a character comparing the change of technologies, or maybe their home, with those that they saw in a movie when their grandparents were young. Kyla, can you think of another one?
Going from Mars to meteorites.
Okay, going from Mars to meteorites. Did that help? And that's something, actually, that's a really good question. That is something that we could pull out maybe and look for as examples that students have actually used, instead of Kyla and I thinking on the fly here. So we could get you some better examples of that. Good question, making us think here. Okay, the next criterion we're going to take a look at, and this is one that carries a higher weight. The criterion here goes from 1 point all the way up to 15 points. So this is one that we as coaches want to make sure we're nurturing in our students, but also making sure as we're evaluating that we are looking for these items very, very carefully. And we can read through these together. They have strong and positive aspects. There's a logical connection to the topic. We've seen this in other criterion as well. This is a biggie, the rising action, the conflict that does lead for the resolution. So if the storyline is being built up for all of this action or a potential conflict, and the students then all of a sudden lead to a resolution such as, oh, and I just woke up. Okay, that was a weak idea development. But if they really take the time to explain the resolution after the conflict, that's going to be a stronger idea development score. Their explanations of their ideas should be believable. They should be futuristic, they should be creative, but they should also be believable. There are some cause and effects that have happened. So if a character chooses to take action within a storyline, that the consequences of that action do match that, and it is connected to what's actually going to impact the storyline. The sophistication in organizational strategies. A lot of times our students maybe have diary entries, or they look back at the reflection of 5 years ago in their life, or they look forward to their life. And those organizational strategies do help their ideas to really come to fruition through their writing. Natural transitions. After 5 minutes, the character experiences this action. So that's a natural transition rather than just saying next, next, next. Those transitions are not how we would speak, and we want to encourage the students and reward them when they're using those transitions. Reflections, insights, thought bubbles from our characters, reflective things. You know, maybe Charlotte stood there staring at the entrance to the door and wondered to herself, if I go through this, will I be able to go out? So those kinds of reflective pieces give us insight into the ideas of what she's thinking or what might be about to happen. And it invites the reader to make connections and invites us to reflect on the points being made. Our stronger writers are actually inviting us into their stories. We become part of their stories. We're thinking about the characters. We're thinking about the action as we are reading through their piece. Do we have any questions on idea development? So we have no ideas on idea development. Is using the first person or the third person view make the scenario stronger? That's a question that just came in. I would say that you probably cannot answer that as a yes or no answer. I think we've had some extremely powerful first person views and extremely powerful third person views, and I would say that's probably a generalization that I wouldn't be able to make. Kyla, do you have any insight on that one?
It accounts for the writer as a whole and the quality of their work, and also the reading preferences of the evaluators.
Okay, so Kyla said it does take account the writer as a whole, whether it's the first person or third person. But Kyla did also mention that sometimes it does account for the evaluator's preference. So if we think back to our biases discussion, if you are an evaluator who knows that you prefer first person views or third person views, that is something that we would want to make ourselves aware of so that we were subjectively assigning our scores and not using our own personal preference. So thanks, objectively, yes, sorry. Thank you, Kyla. Objectively, not subjectively. Okay, we have an extra bubble here. In depth at the strong level signifies understanding in great detail and the ability to share the key details the reader needs to understand. Complex at the exemplary level goes one step further, and that's a good explanation of exemplary. It does go one step further. So instead of the comprehensive awareness, the writer's connecting this information to complex ideas that are revealed in those key pertinent details, engaging the reader, allowing him or her to take the story to a new level of understanding. And resolution in our story, this is a good note to consider. Resolution does not necessarily mean a solution. So sometimes the story ends, and remember they're only allotted 1,500 words. Sometimes the story ends, and while there might be a resolution to the story, there is not always a solution. That was a good note to consider. Okay, style and voice. This is the other aspect, the other criterion that earns up to 15 points. This is the tone of the scenario. Does the scenario bring you a smile? Does the scenario persuade you to a view that maybe you hadn't considered? Does the scenario simply inform you? Does it bring a tear to your eye or pull on your heartstrings? So how does it appeal to you? How does it appeal possibly to others? The tone of the scenario, we do encourage our students not to be haughty or chummy, and we do encourage our students not to be formulaic. Creative writing does not follow a formula. This is not a 5-paragraph essay. This is not a letter. It could be a 5-paragraph essay. It could be a letter, but there is not a formula. Our scenarios should be colorful and active in their verb usage. They should reflect a character's thoughts and emotions. We don't need all of those day-to-day details of our characters. Sometimes we do get caught up in too much dialogue, and that does impede the understanding. So the use of dialogue can be very, very powerful in the style and voice criterion. We do encourage our students to use a variety of adverbs and adjectives. We also ask that our students try not to repeat sentences and words, that variety, that rich use of vocabulary, starting sentences maybe with a preposition instead of always a noun, will give us that variety that's going to increase that style and voice score. We are looking for evidence, literary devices. Similes, metaphors, idioms, personification, foreshadowing are all very powerful to increase the style and voice, the feel of the story. We want you to be on the lookout for those really powerful transitions, the skillful use of vocabulary, using the right words in the right place at the right time. They don't have to be chock full of 17 high-level vocabulary words based on the topic. A more skillful use of 8 or 10 of those higher-level vocabulary words could be more powerful. Those well-crafted and varied sentences are very, very impactful to the scenarios and how they read to our students.
Question about chummy.
Chummy, that's like being friendly with your, so it might be, sometimes our younger, less mature writers might say, "Dear reader, I'm here to tell you a fabulous tale about a character going on a journey using her drone." So trying to talk to the reader, I guess, and be buddy with the reader. It might work, but as a tried and true literary technique, that is one that doesn't always work as intended. Did that answer that question? You have any thoughts, Kyla, you wanted to add to that?
I think that went well.
Okay, but wait, somebody said, let's see, a funny. Having a conversational tone, my kingdom could be a huge thumbs up, it would seem. Yes, absolutely. Someone just put in that question. It could, but it could also go against, because then it might not appeal to that wide range of readers. So with anything in high quality writing and literature, we've all seen examples of things that have worked very, very well for some authors, and then things that maybe don't work as well for others. But we have seen more examples of it harming the style of the writing than really enhancing it. Of course, there is, just like the question about first person or third person, there is no right or wrong as far as all of that goes. It is all part of the holistic piece of the writing, the holistic scenario into how things come out from the students. All right, the next thing we're going to look at is character development. This was always one of my favorite things to teach, just the way characters are so unique in stories and how we can turn them into anything we want and just go on that adventure. So we want to look for the central main character. We're not going to have 7 main characters in a 1,500 word scenario, because then we don't really get a feel for that central main character or two. It is important that to realize the character may be an inanimate character or an animate character. It could be a human, could be a plant, it could be an animal. All those different viewpoints add uniqueness to the story. There might be a second main character that is also well developed, but more than that would probably take away from the development of others and be hard to carry through all of those strong character traits and all of those. So what does a main character trait look like? We have emotional response again. So we felt that in the style and voice, that we might laugh, we might cry. Again, our character traits might make us feel compassion for a character. We might feel angry at a character, but those emotions tell us that our writer has crafted a main character that we really know about, that we've learned about, that they're strong. We might have a character that experiences a change in the scenario based on an event or an action within that story. So if a character encounters controversy or conflict halfway through the story, and then that character changes, whether good or bad change, the development of that character based on what the characters experience through the story does indicate strong development of that craft by the writer. We want to be able to see insight into the ideas and issues that the character is faced with in the scenario. So if a character is sitting in a courtroom of the future and is a juror and makes a really poor decision for the environment, but has really good insight as to why they made this decision, even though we don't believe it, that insight that they were faced with, that they showed through the writing, is going to demonstrate a strong character. Emotions, personality traits, how a character walks or saunters, or their facial expressions that are described, all add to the character development score. And are there any questions on this one? Okay, no character questions. We do remind evaluators scores of 1 should be reserved for scenarios that narrate without advancing a character through action. Character development is something that we don't typically see as a non-occurrence. So we really don't want to be a Scrooge here and give those really low scores in this area. Mechanics. Advanced writers use conventions creatively for a purpose or to enhance meanings. So if commas or semicolons are used in a way that is unconventional, we want to make sure that we wouldn't count points off for that, and we would use that as a creative aspect to enhance that meaning. Dialogue, dialect, slang is encouraged, and I like this quantifier here, so long as it's not a distraction. So if it's overused, it can be a distraction. I have seen dialogue really overused and it becomes very cumbersome to read the story. So we do want to be mindful of that. We want to look for and grade for appropriate punctuation, capitalization, spelling, and grammar. And I do want to pause right here and mention that many times if a scenario has been translated from a native language, we do see the mechanics score as much lower. And what we do as an intervention here at the International Office is our translated scenarios, we ask the affiliate director to submit the scores for mechanics for each of those scenarios, so that, let's say in the international scenario writing competition, we noticed some 1s on mechanics for our translated scenarios. We would cross-reference back to those original scenarios, and if they had a higher score there, we would look at that and discuss with the evaluator what might have happened there. We wouldn't want to ever penalize students for translation. So we do try to be very, very mindful of that. And these are processes that we have determined over the years with our students who are working first in a native language, then having their writers translated, in discussions with their coaches, and in also talking to those affiliate directors. We want to make sure that grammar or mechanics enhances the story, or if it hinders the flow of the story, that can impact the score. And we want to consider whether or not this is in draft or final form, and it should be in final form for this competition. Any questions here on mechanics? I don't see it. Kyla just walked in here and told me there was a question, but the last one I have is the chummy question.
Punctuation differs by country.
Yes, yes. So essentially, here's a really good question. Punctuation, for example, differs slightly by country. Periods within or outside the quotes how is it evaluated? I would go back to asking yourself whether it enhances or hinders the flow of the story. I wouldn't think that a period inside quotes or outside quotes would hinder the flow of the story. And I would say if the student used it consistently throughout the story one way or the other, I would maybe just include that in the comments, that you did notice that and that you be mindful of that. But I really wouldn't score a student very low on that. Same thing with spelling, using the Queen's English versus US English. As long as it's consistent within that scenario, we would want to be very mindful of that. You know, the word personalized, the Queen's English would spell that S-E-D, whereas the US English would spell that with a Z. So we would not lower a score for that or even need to make a comment on that. That would just be something that we would be mindful of as evaluators of an international competition. Topic-related research. Remember, the scenarios must be connected to one of the 10 eligible topics for that year, but it's not a research paper. It is a creative story. The knowledge and understanding of that topic should inform the setting. It should add to the storyline, and it may even add to the characters and what they're choosing to do and the actions that they're taking. So this is a great graphic. I'm going to give the credit to Kyla here for creating this one because it looks really good. I think it explains it very, very nicely here. We have the topic in the middle. We look at the research as being artfully blended. You almost don't even notice it. The terminology is appropriate. The trends are current and the future, making that logical extension. It informs the story, and the facts are accurate. Those few facts that are interwoven in that story are indeed accurate and part of that story. So that's a great graphic to highlight this criterion. Okay, I do see another question that came in. What does, did the question go away? Okay, I think you answered it?
Yes.
Okay, Kyla answered a question. It must have been a one-on-one question and not a group question. So thanks, Kyla. Okay, so we've just talked about all of the different criterion and how they are scored on the rubric, whether it be 13 points for something that has a possible of 15 points or whether it's 3 points for a possible of 5 points. But that's only one piece of the evaluation. A very vital piece to the evaluation process is the feedback. Of course, we want to have a positive attitude when we are providing feedback. We want to be encouraging. If you've ever had a piece of writing read by something else, we immediately think back, most of us, to the red pens of our youth and all of those marks that are on that. Our students coming up might not know the red pens and just know the comments in their Google Docs from their teachers, so a little bit of change there. We want to promote excellence as indicated in our guidelines, so we want to guide positively when we make our suggestions for improvement, that we direct those in a positive manner. We want to reward creativity of thought, and we want to encourage critical thinking. So we never want to undermine those creative pieces. Here are some sample comments that we have. I like your main character, good character development, nice job creating empathy for your main character when her sister wasn't made. I enjoyed the way you developed the story so that the emotions and empathy about the events revealed the conflict. You successfully used the limited character technique in her experience of grief. So those are some different comments, and you can see there are some different levels of those comments, and I think we do have a poll here. If you would go ahead and take the poll, which comment would you use? Okay, Kyla, are we done with our poll? Okay, we have 72% of the votes in. And I'm very impressed that no one chose A as the best comment or B. Those are very, very general comments. C and D are much stronger comments. You can actually learn something about the story from the comments. Effective feedback. If you have evaluated for future problem solving before, it is almost 100% sure that you have heard the term the feedback sandwich. The feedback sandwich starts and ends with positives. You are asked in the feedback sandwich to provide praise that's legitimate, it is believable, it is substantial. And then instead of providing the area of improvement in a negative way, asking a question encourages writers to rethink an idea. This might look like, have you considered explaining why your character felt so angry about the situation? That would ask a question and have the author think, rather than saying to a student, your character development was so weak, I didn't even know your character was different than another character. So asking questions is a very positive way to ask students to rethink things. Limit criticism. We don't want to provide too much criticism. Even if a writer or an adult or a person is open to growth, they can only process so much feedback in one sitting. So if maybe you see 5 or 6 things that a writing needed to enhance, maybe only choose 2 or 3 of those to share at this time with the writer. And remember that even the weakest scenario required a great amount of time and effort and is likely a personal achievement for the author. Our writers come from a variety of backgrounds, both in their diversity of their home lives, their places around the globe, and their instruction from their writing teachers. A lot of our writers have hours and hours and hours devoted to these scenarios, and maybe they're a struggling writer, maybe they're an emerging writer, maybe they are trying something new. So we don't want to provide too many pieces of criticism that might squash their efforts in the future. So here are some sample comments here. Work on character development. Not even providing a comment. My questions are very much like Raheem's. Who is they? What government or special interest group is operating in this way? I'd like to know more about Gwen's species. I'm wondering, is she the only one of her kind? She was heartbroken. Perhaps you could find a more impressive way to convey Sylvie's heartbreak, such as dialogue. Your writing is honest and your passion obvious. So in all of these comments, I believe we have another poll. All right, 15 seconds left. We have 72% who have voted.
You had a question come in.
Okay. I'm watching the results, not the questions. Okay, one of the questions that just came in is, are we expected to give feedback on each scoring criterion? No, you are not required to give feedback on each one. That would be very, very time consuming by our evaluators. And those are the kinds of things that throughout the writing process that coaches, parents, or even through the peer revision process, that kind of comment would happen for each criterion. We ask for overall comments. You might have comments about character development on one scenario. You might have comments about mechanics on another scenario. You might have comments about style and voice and idea development on another one. So as long as we're providing feedback, we don't have to do it for everyone. And I know Kyla provided samples to you, and that would be a good thing to go back and look at so you can see how different evaluators offer different feedback. Good questions. Okay, after you have completed the score sheet and the rubric for each scenario in your packet, remember those are 7 to 9 scenarios that you would be asked to evaluate.
The poll results are showing.
Oh, the poll results are showing? How do I fix that? That didn't happen last time. Okay. Am I back on?
They picked I'd like to know more about the species.
Yes. So I'd like to know more about the species was a strong comment, along with the she was heartbroken comment. Both of those were very good.
Okay, turn your screen back on. And there's a question about the heartbroken.
I don't think I understood the question. I did see it.
What would be a better way to convey she was heartbroken?
What would be a better way to convey she was heartbroken? I'm not sure I understand the question. The evaluator gave that as a comment. She was asking the writer to explain maybe more, maybe in the scenario, we don't have that here, maybe the scenario mentioned that a character was heartbroken, but perhaps there were some details missing that
or describing her features or her reaction when she heard the news beyond simply saying she was heartbroken, but she felt the weight on her chest as she heard the news that her father had passed. She was utterly heartbroken. Something like that might be an alternate way for a student to consider offering that description and raising that development component.
Okay, I hope you heard Kyla. I think what the comment meant was that the writer should have elaborated more on what heartbroken looked like, what heartbroken could be visualized for this character. And this is a very small snapshot. You're only seeing comments without seeing the scenario. So maybe that would have been more helpful. Okay, so here is how we rank our packet of evaluations. And here is an example of a packet of 6 scenarios. The scenarios are coded. They are anonymous. So you'll see here in our chart that there's scenario 245, 221, and then we have our points here. And you will see that the scenario that earned 56 points was a rank of 1. We do ask our evaluators that if you get 2 scenarios with the same points, that you adjust those so that there is not a tie. The top scoring scenario would be the rank of 1. The second highest, the rank of 2, a third of 3, and so on. So we then assign ranks within the packet. And then we use these in conjunction with the points to take a look at advancing winning scenarios. And the reason we use ranks and points is to help balance that tendency of some evaluators to be a Santa and some evaluators to be a Scrooge. So if you take a look at scenario 214, it got 56 points from the evaluator. Remembering that 65 points is the highest possible points. It could be that this scenario was not at that really, really high range. It just happened to be the highest in the sample, and that's okay. It could be that scenario 214 was earned 64 points by another evaluator and also got a rank of 1. So the ranking helps us see where the scenarios come out, and then we can look at the points and make sure that we are properly moving on the right scenarios to the next level or to determine the winners. So here are some reminders to consider before evaluating. We ask that you review previous champions and other examples to get into the groove to help you identify a baseline for division quality. And what we like to do from the international office before we ask people to start evaluating, we will let you know based on your preference and based on where the needs are, which division you will be evaluating, and provide you with the prior year's champ for that division, so you can just get a feel for what that division looks like at the highest international levels. Before you start evaluating the scenarios in your packet, give them a preliminary read through just to get a feel for what they all look like. And the reason that's a good idea is you might have 6 scenarios in a packet, and you read the first couple and you're like, oh, these are really, really good, and they're earning a lot of high points. And then you read the next 2, and the next 2 are just 2 steps above those other 3. So then you might want to rethink, maybe perhaps based on the packet you have, that your preliminary scores of those first ones you read would have been more in line with what Santa would give rather than the entire packet as a whole. So that orientation is important. We want to consider the age of the writer. A lot of our students present themselves at a very high level. They're advanced students, they're problem solvers, they're often leaders in their communities. They might sound like they're in graduate school, but let's please don't forget their youth. Another reminder are these personal biases. We've touched on this a few times, and it is because it is very, very important as a group that is international. We want to look at their religious beliefs, their cultural beliefs, their economic, and their political backgrounds. We need to be open to new ideas. And a good example of this is if you were to walk into your local bookstore right now, you could pick up 27 books, and in all of those books, you could probably find something that would be offensive to someone. But this is creative writing. This is creating a future that is in the minds of these young writers. So we want to make sure that we leave our biases out of this and simply evaluate based on those rubric criterions. Before we talk about next steps, are there any questions? And I will pause here for a minute or two to give you time to type in questions. Are there any questions? We're going to talk last and next about how you certify to be an international evaluator, but I do want to take any questions now. All right, Kyla, we don't have any questions. I think they're all ready. Well, the good news is we are in an amazingly digital age where we can share our questions on email. Okay, And a question just came in. What is the expected turnaround time? For example, given 9 scenarios to evaluate, how quickly are we expected to score them and provide feedback? It would be no less than a week and a half. I believe most of our time frames are 10 to 12 days. And the beauty of this competition is we would provide you with a schedule when we are sending out our surveys to see who is interested. So you would be able to actually say, yes, I can do this. Yes, I know the dates. Here they are. I have the time and availability to do this. So you're going to know what you're signing yourself up for and be prepared for that before you do. Excellent question. And if you have more questions after the fact, just send an email to Kyla and she will help you with everything you want to know and more. So what are the next steps? Let's say that you are very inspired from this presentation and would like to be certified to be an international evaluator for our scenario writing competition. So what do you have to do? Well, you get to enjoy and read 3 wonderful scenarios. We will then ask you to evaluate them and complete our Excel score sheet, which matches the rubrics. We would then compare you, and you see that's in quotes, compared to benchmark evaluations and to determine your evaluation certification. And this just helps get us an idea, or give us an idea, bad grammar there, score me low on mechanics. This would help give us an idea, maybe we gave you 3 seniors to read and your scores were very, very high on all 3 of those, but then our benchmark evaluators scored them significantly lower. That might just tell us that senior division writing is something you're not familiar with. Maybe a junior division writing might be more your style. So it gives us a lot of information and some gauges to go by. We will provide you back a feedback booklet to let you know where you scored and ranked your evaluations and compared to these benchmark evaluations. And that would make you ready to evaluate in the 2019 International Scenario Writing Competition. And that will occur in March 2019. Hard to believe. And most importantly, you would be making a difference in the life of a young writer. So we are hopeful that you would be willing to donate your time for this. We do pay small stipends for evaluation to our students. And let's see what we have. Oh, we already have a request for CMPS evaluations. Okay. We've already actually thought about that, so thank you for that question. Are there any other questions that we could answer? At this time, Kyla's in here now with me, so we can both be on a speaker. We do have a brief survey at the conclusion of the webinar, if you would please take that. And Kyla, do you have anything you want to add? No? Okay, she's saying no. Well, we thank you so much for attending. This is a brand new webinar system that the International Office just purchased for us, so thank you for being our test subjects on this. I hope we didn't have too many hiccups for you and impede your understanding. Can we have a copy of the PowerPoint? Yes, Ms. Horton, you may have a copy of it. It will be available on YouTube. And since you are an affiliate director, we can also get that to you. There is not a fee for getting certified as an evaluator. Excellent question. What a smart group. We have fabulous questions coming in.
For those of you that have not certified in a previous component, like it's indicated there, it's 3 scenarios, and I work with the evaluators to determine a timeline, normally identifying a 2 or 3 week period that you think you would be able to take the time and necessary to go through it and then get it back to me. But it's not a hard and fast deadline immediately. It's not that you must do this in the next 5 days or lose the opportunity to proceed. Just let me know and we can coordinate on a one-on-one basis from there.
And then another question is, do we need to physically be present at the international conference to evaluate? This competition, the International Scenario Writing Competition, is a virtual competition and evaluation prior to the international conference. We do have an on-site scenario writing team competition, a little different than this competition, and we have some evaluators on site and some evaluators virtually. So good question there. Okay, it sounds like our questions have been answered and so many great insights gleaned. Oh, wait, one more question, sorry. Can we apply to evaluate on site? Judy asked. Yes, Judy, we do need 4 evaluators on site every year at the international conference, and we do send out a survey to all of our certified evaluators asking them their availability and interest, and Kyla will do that in July, or not July, January, the other J month. How many evaluators score one scenario? Pam asks, and that is 3 in each round. So there's a first round where 3 evaluators score each scenario, and then we advance the top scoring scenarios on to a final round where 3 more evaluators evaluate. Okay, any additional questions, please email them to us. We will provide you follow-up. We will provide you with answers, and we thank you so very much for attending and hope everyone has a great rest of their evening or afternoon or day, whichever time zone you're in. Thank you.